who is chronically oral. Neither one of these pictures look like the land of milk and honey. So I'm looking at them wondering who the hell is going to feed me.
Who's going to feed you? Okay, interesting.
Yes.
So I feel like the one on the left, the person taking the picture is part of the landscape. It's very immediate. Whereas the one on the right, it's maybe an other, somebody looking in and not really a part of it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Oh, I love all these interpretations and thoughts. Great.
I have a question.
Sure.
What did the artist title this picture on the right?
Yes, excellent question. Titled it Israel Encamping around Mount Sinai, I believe, but I will triple check once we go out of screen share.
In answer to that, that building is probably the Mishkan.
Yes, yes, I believe it is.
If I have it, I have the source sheet open, and
Oh, great. Thanks, Amy.
Rabbi Greenberg, it's Israel encamped round about the tabernacle in the wilderness.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
I think
In the wilderness of Sinai. I left the of Sinai off.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Amy.
The difference between the two portraits are that the one on the left does not shape a community. It keeps everybody separate one from the other. There are risks. You can't get anywhere quickly. It's almost the one on the right is really you're in the palm of God's hand. It's a community where people go to and fro and don't worry about the desert landscape separating them into smaller groups.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I love the idea of like the image in the palm of God. Yeah, sorry, Miriam, go ahead.
On Barry's comment, may I? He said, where's the food coming from? I think it was deliberately set in a desolate place where there's no vegetation, there's no game to hunt for, to feed oneself. One is entirely dependent on God for all these needs. So it emphasizes that relationship, and it should make the people more open to accepting and believing in that, in God.
Beautiful, beautiful. You guys are hitting on a lot of the things that the commentator said. You're beautiful Torah commentators. Well done. And yes, many of them say one of the reasons we got the Torah in the desert is to, sort of show our reliance on God. So beautiful, Miriam. Thank you.
Also, a distinction between the one on the left and one on the right. The one on the left, it's left to your imagination to generate a picture of God, either metaphorically or otherwise. The one to the right, there's the Mishkan. So it becomes kind of a concrete a manifestation of that. And I'm wondering if the issue is here, it's not so easy to understand and embrace the God that our five senses cannot access. The one on the right, at least with the Mishkan, allows for that in some small way.
Beautiful, beautiful. Right. So different ways of approaching God, and is it all something that we have to figure out on our own, or is there some sort of tangible way that we can connect? Beautiful. All right. Any last thought on these images? We can certainly, keep thinking about them as we go through the texts.
I think that the way the photographer, I guess, took that picture on the left, that the sky and the clouds are so visible. To me, it sort of indicates the closeness between the land where the people will be and the heavens.
Beautiful, beautiful. Can I just say, this is why I love sharing images at the start of classes sometimes, because I just feel like you have just come up with such beautiful and moving things. So thank you, Diane. Lovely. And I think I saw Arthur raising his hand. Arthur,
yes, I'm thinking that in the painting on the right, that's not vegetation. Those are huts or shelters that the people are staying in. And at first I thought it might have been vegetation, but those are shelters that people are staying in. But the bigger thing is in the middle, right in the middle of the photo, there looks to be this campfire with this vertical plume coming up from the campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering what that is supposed to signify. That campfire with that smoke coming up from it.
It's a description of the Torah about the cloud near the Mishkan.
Hmm.
I think he's referring to the smoke that's coming up from that. It looks to me like a building with a little red dome or
No,
red roof.
It's a campfire.
That,
It's a campfire.
or
It's a campfire. So
mizbeach.
maybe it's a sacrifice.
A mizbeach.
Like the
It's a
Mishkan.
mizbeach there.
Right. So it's probably right. It very likely is most likely the mizbeach, right? It's probably an altar where they're sacrificing something at the tabernacle or the tent of meeting. Yeah, most likely. Yes, and I think Evelyn, did you have your hand raised? You can have the last word if you did. No. I'm gonna unmute you. Hold on one second. We couldn't hear you. No. All right, Evelyn, I'm trying to unmute you, but it doesn't seem to be working. So maybe Ben can figure out what's going on, and we'll keep going in the meantime, and he'll see if he can help you. Great. So I'm gonna stop share for right now, so I can see all your lovely faces.
Also, one last thing, just to because I think it was Rabbi Katz. It's not Bamidbar, it's Bimidbar.
Bamidbar, correct. Thank you. Thank you. Hebrew grammar was not, or I should say, biblical Hebrew grammar is not always my strong point. Having learned how to speak Hebrew from Israelis at a very young age, I know how to say everything, but it does not always correct when you look at biblical Hebrew. So thank you for the correction. Excellent. Ben, did you want to say something before we get going?
I think Evelyn is unmuted, so she wants to try to say something.
Great, thank you.
Right now, just help me with this because I'm going to be attending a lot of things. Right now on my screen it says, and I know I'm taking away from the lecture, which I feel terrible about, but right now on the top it says mute, and if I click on mute, it's
Yeah, now you're muted, Evelyn. So you can just mute or unmute yourself. All right, great. So thank you everyone for your beautiful interpretations of those pictures. And I think you hit on a lot of the themes that we're going to be talking about in terms of why potentially the Torah was given in the desert. So I love, Diane, I think it was you who said the connection between heavens and the earth, that we're reliant on God, potentially that it's sort of this desolate, empty area that can sort of make you reassess things in a different way. And the reason I brought both of these images, which I think will be interesting, is the one on the left, right? No one else was there. It's just the landscape and the photographer, it looks like. And you literally can't see anyone else. And on the right is this whole camp of Israel, also in this desolate, empty, harsh environment, but somehow all in it together while they're alone. So as you can already imagine, maybe by the way I'm saying this, there's a lot that maybe can speak to the way things are for us right now. But just sort of take those ideas and those images with you when we dive into the text, and sort of as we start thinking about what does it mean for the Torah to be given in the desert and what kind of deserts we might be in right now. All right, beautiful. So now I'm going to share the source sheet. So if anyone printed out the source sheet, since I know Erica did, and anyone else who has it with you, feel free to take it out. We're going to go straight to Numbers 1:1. So we're actually literally only going to be looking at one text from the Parsha, only one verse from the whole Parsha. And let me just get out of this, and then I will go to my source sheet. Great. All right, so we're going to have kind of two sections of all of this. We're going to start talking about desert and wilderness and what that could mean. And then we're going to talk about hefker, the concept of hefker, which some of you may have heard of. We'll talk a lot more about it sort of in the second half, but which means sort of ownerless, empty, unattached. Sort of these two different concepts to look at desert and the wilderness and why we gave the Torah. So I know Rabbi Katz did not have you read last week, but we're going to sort of try to phase in things as we go every week with you. So if I I might call on you to read, or I might ask for a volunteer. So I know Debbie Eiferman has a beautiful reading voice. So if I can call on you, Debbie, would you be willing to read the first text? Let's unmute you. No, still muted.
Do you want me to read the translation of the Hebrew?
Yes, please. And the Hebrew is there for whoever feels comfortable reading it.
On the first day of the second month, in the second year following the Exodus from the land of Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting, saying.
Beautiful, thank you. Tell it's like a poet's voice, the way you read that. Thank you very much. So this is how the whole book that we're starting now, the fourth book of the Torah, begins. So it's emphasizing a few different things. So feel free to comment on the other ones too if you want. But why do you think they're emphasizing that God spoke to Moses, Bamidbar Sinai, in the wilderness, in the desert? It can be translated different ways of Sinai. Feel free to just unmute yourselves if you have a thought.
Well, the people were in the wilderness of their souls, the desert of their souls. They hadn't coalesced yet into the nation that they would become. So they're literally in a desert.
Beautiful. So they're in a literal desert and sort of that metaphorical desert of post-slavery, trying to figure out what does this all mean.
There are very little distractions. So you have to be focused on everything that's happening.
Yeah, right. Because what else is around in the desert? For those of you who might have hiked in the desert, either in Israel or in the United States, there's not always so much to look at. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, someone's getting a phone call. Any other thoughts?
It puts it in the time frame of 1 month, whatever a month is, from the Exodus. Plus 1 year.
Plus 2 years,
First day of second month in the second year.
Right.
So they've been schlepping around for a year already.
Right. Right, that's an excellent point. So, right, this is not their first day in the desert. This is, a year and a month in. I think you're right. Yeah. So what does that mean to be in this sort of desolate landscape for that long?
I think if you look at from the perspective that this was written not for the immediate time, but for in a different time period, and is looking back at the story and telling the story, that it's important to remind everyone that at this point they were still in the wilderness and that they had continued to be in the wilderness. So that place becomes important when you're telling a story looking back.
Right, sort of grounding, where they were, setting it up, and also as a literary device, which I don't know if exactly is what you were talking about, but sort of it's important for a good story to know where you are.
I think it's also the wilderness of their soul. They haven't heard about what Sinai is going to give them, and they're wandering around trying to make a nation of themselves.
Right. So sort of similar to what Arthur was saying. Yeah, thank you, Howard. That trying to figure out what does it mean to be a nation, and as we know, they wander way more than 2 years in the wilderness. So we know this is only the start of their journey. They don't know that yet, but sort of that long wandering in this place to figure out who they really are. Beautiful.
When I sometimes when somebody asks me how I am, and I don't know how many times a year this happens in terms of my response, I'm apt to say, I'm in the wilderness, which means things are unsettled. There's some level of anxiety. I don't feel like I have enough control over my life. And there's a plea, an implicit plea in who I'm speaking to is, please help me resolve those issues. If you're a friend of mine, please help me resolve those issues.
Barry, do you feel like that more the last 2 months, or were you saying you were in the wilderness before all of this hit?
Yeah, I've used that phrase more often in the last 10 weeks than I probably have in the last 70 years. So yes, it's this sense of incredible uncertainty. And on the one hand, so I go back and forth between seeing the cup as half empty and half full.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really very fluid. It depends on where you catch me as a function of, is it a half empty or a half full for me?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would imagine for most of us throughout all of this that it probably changes during each week, each day, and probably sometimes minute by minute, depending on what's happening. And thank you for bringing it in. And I didn't say this in the beginning, but please, I feel like Torah does its best job when it speaks to how we're feeling in our lives right now, always. And I think especially in the situation we're in. So as we go through all of these texts, feel free to sort of bring in how you feel like this is relating to you, if you feel like it's relating to you as we go.
Well, it's an interesting literary device that by the time this was written, everybody knew the 40 years. It was like part of culture that everyone knew they were going to want. But imagine being there in the first day of the second month of the second year and not realizing that you had 39 years ahead of you, in the same way that 10 years down the line from now, or 20 years or whatever, people are going to talk about the coronavirus of 2020 started in 2020, and they're going to know how long it lasted and how long we suffered. We don't know that now.
Right.
We can only, we're in the desert. We're speculating about how long it's going to be till we get to the promised land of whatever's on the other side. But 10 years or 20 years down the road, people will know that.
Right.
And that I think about every single day, you know, that those people are so lucky, you know, in the future that they're going to know how long this lasted. We don't have any idea how long this is going to last.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. Just thinking, you know, right, like we're like the Israelites very much in that sense of we really don't know where in the journey we are right now. I mean, we know how far we've been in it so far. Like they knew they were in for a year and a month or 2 months. And we know we've been in it for 10 weeks, but we don't really know how long it's going to last. So, right, what does it mean to be in that uncertain place of wandering and not sure when the journey is coming to an end? Beautiful, Arthur. Thank you.
But I will say that being in this class is like an oasis in the wilderness.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm very happy to hear that. That made my day. Thanks, Terry.
I think
anytime, Rabbi.
Without getting too political, because that always gets me into deep trouble, I think one of the differences is they kind of had Moses to look to. And I'm afraid we're really in the wilderness because in the highest levels of our government, at least I feel personally, we don't have anyone to look to kind of guide us and help us with the uncertainty.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah, can I say something?
Sure, yes. And last comment, and then we're going to move on to the next test. Go ahead. Is that Marion?
Yeah, it's Marion.
Hi, go ahead.
I was thinking about the Lord spoke to Moses, that phrase, because to me it speaks to the fact that Moses always hesitated and given what job he had and his role with the Jewish people. So I think here, you know, he doesn't have Aaron to push him. He needs something stronger to give him the chizuk to go to lead this group. And because it's only 2 years, I think it's a very precarious time. And I think we're all in the same situation. We're looking for something to hold on to so that we can go forward. And I think that's why the Lord, the sentence says, the Lord spoke to Moses.
I love that. And I also feel like that's a great way to see sort of all of us as Moses of, you know, in a feeling of uncertainty and unsure of if we can do things, how we can do it, if we have the strength to do it, sort of, you know, is it God who's strengthening us? I certainly hope so for all of you. Is it other people in our lives who are strengthening us? Is it our family? Is it our community? Sort of who is giving us the energy to keep going on this journey when we don't know how long it's going to go for? Beautiful, Marianne.
Rabbi Greenberg, can I say something?
Sure, go ahead. Last comment, and then we're going to go on to the next source. Go ahead, Evelyn.
I just wanted to comment on something that Barry said, that when people ask him where he is, and he feels that somehow they're asking him to resolve something. I don't feel that way. I feel that when people, I feel that perhaps people ask him because they want to realize that they're not alone in their feelings. They want validation for their own feelings.
Yeah, certainly can be true. And I would say certainly this is a hard time for everyone. It may hit at different points, and it may, for some people it might be financial, for some people they might actually be sick, for some people it might be sort of the psychological toll this is all taking, but I think it's pretty safe to say this is universally a very hard time for everyone right now. And that's why community is so important, and that's why it's so lovely to have these venues when we can connect it to each other still, even if it's over computers, I would say. All right, so beautiful. So we're going to go on to Leslie Hazelton from a book called When Mountains Roar, which is just an amazing title. So she was a British journalist, wrote for Time, talked a lot about politics and religion, and just I thought had this really interesting piece about what the desert evokes in us. So let's see who I want to call on to read. Marion, would you like to read for us?
Okay. Suddenly, there is no sign of human life. There is a heightened sense of awareness that I am alone, out of reach of other humans, the only thinking sentient creature in this vast landscape. It is an exhilarating feeling and terrifying too, for this heightened sense of vitality comes together with the awareness of death and its possibilities. As I stand alone and all the rock and sand, stone and gravel, my body building busily proclaims its vitality. But the very contrast between this living, beating, breathing body and the still silent wilderness in which it stands impels me into recognition of the intricate and unassailable symbiosis of life and earth. Each time anew, the desert forces me into this awareness, an assault on my alienation. Should I read further?
Yes, please read the second.
Okay. It seems to me that all Western societies dealing with the desert exploration, development, religious experience are rooted in the image of the desert as a deathly place, and that the fascination with the desert is part of the ageless human struggle to come to terms with the conditions of existence and with the inevitability of death after life and the search for life within life.
Beautiful. Thank you for reading it. So she wrote this book actually wandering around the desert in Sinai and in the Arava. So, sort of in the deserts theoretically where the story of the Exodus happened. So I forgot to say that in the beginning, just wanted to add that in. So, so what lessons does Hazelton believe the desert can teach us? And what are your impressions of her depiction of it?
Yeah. As a study of the desert, which is seemingly dead without life and just death, there is life in the desert.
Right.
Create a whole civilization and not to despair.
Yeah, right. Beautiful. And right, that's what's interesting.
It seems to me that this goes against what we're aware of, perhaps not in the forefront. This is the chapter that gives a census, and there's supposedly 600,000 odd males in the census, plus their households and families, so that's quite a number. Now that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people in your in your visual area. It's a lot of people in your personal space. So you're doing a lot of interacting, even if it's only 60,000, 6,600. It's a lot of people all around you. So you have different concerns, and perhaps your vision, your horizon is lower because you're always interacting in one way or another, either with your immediate clan or with the next one over, or with Moses and Aaron. So it seems to me that while we focus on the barrenness and desolation and bleakness, the reality may have been very different.
Yeah, right, because they were there with a lot of other people. But I do wonder.
Very little personal space or social distancing involved.
Right. But they were still in this sort of vast place where theoretically, we know they run into other tribes that they're at war with at different points, but they're not in houses. They're rebuilding and unpacking the tabernacle, their own, I don't know what they were sleeping on, whatever things they were sleeping on, and they're continually moving. So there's definitely not a sense of solid place, even if there's a lot of other people.
So there's no sense of solid place because they were so nomadic, but in terms of the desolation and bleakness and some of the awareness of the world, it doesn't seem to be likely.
Yeah, I think I saw Sabina raising her hand, and then I see Suzanne. So let's do Sabina and then Suzanne.
Yeah, just to take what Miriam said a little further, assuming there are 1 to 2 million people, Jews traveling, based on the 600,000 males of a certain age. When I first learned as a kid, Midbar in day school, we were told they wandered, and yet buried in numbers is a reference that there were actually about, if I remember, 42 stations where they stopped. So they didn't just wander and wander, they stopped for basically a year at a time, and they build their tents, and they have the food given to them, and they have water given to them, and it's not like they got to pack tomorrow morning and go on. So you're sitting around a year among thousands and thousands of fellow Jews, and you have time to reflect, to think. And I've always wondered, what do you do when you're sitting around for a year, given food and board, and you got you got Walmart that's going to deliver, you got Costco that's going to deliver, you got no place to go, you got your shelter. What do you think about? Of course, you don't have Zoom, so you can have a class to discuss these things.
Right. Yeah, thank you. No, and that's, again, one of the reasons I thought these texts felt particularly relevant to me, and this idea felt particularly relevant to me in this time. So thank you for bringing that up. Suzanne, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think there's a time in life when we're all in the desert and we're wondering, where is our vitality going to come from? How are we going to move on? And I kind of imagine, Alex, these people are in the desert, everything's taken care of, but how long are we going to be here until something more is going to happen?
Yeah.
So, and that was, when I looked at the pictures, I found it a sort of bleakness and the unknown. And I kind of think that's what we're living through right now, this unknown.
Beautiful.
So,
beautiful. Thank you, Suzanne. Wait, I think I saw Fran had a hand up, and then Fran, did you want to say something? Oh, here, wait, Fran, we have to unmute you. Hold on. I'm going to stop share so we can all see each other for a little bit. Here, Fran, let's unmute you. Go ahead.
I think what we're living with, we had a certainty of existence. And then suddenly a virus is thrust upon us, not only entire humanity. And that is incomprehensible because we don't really know when it will end, how it will end, and natural human curiosity, what caused it. So I think there are many psychological problems that we're dealing with, having been very ensconced in a wonderful life in the 21st century.
Beautiful. Ellie, go ahead. And then Debbie.
Okay. Although there's lots of greenery outside my window, I've been away from home since Purim. Yesterday was the first time I went back just to pick up some things. I've been living with my kids. And it does feel like, when am I going to get to go home? It does feel like a desert to some extent, despite all the greenery, because I wonder all the, as was just said, all the things that used to be there are not there anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So I do feel like I'm in the wilderness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Except for Zoom.
All right, Debbie Eiferman, go ahead. And then we're gonna, I see there's a few more hands, and we're gonna go on to the next text because I wanna make sure we see a little bit more, and then we can take the comments as we go.
I think what I'm hearing from everyone is that we're in a biblical situation with this virus. This is very biblical in nature. And we're that's what we're all saying. We don't know why it's here. We don't know why it happened. It's upon us. It's and what you know, I was struck by the all these red state deplorables when they what's the first thing that they did when they came out? They all went to bars to drink.
Wait, so let's try not to get into politics too much, Arthur, and also Debbie wanted to talk. So, Debbie, go ahead.
I just feel that we're all in the same boat now, but we've been given a unique opportunity to stop and think, what do we want to get back to? Not normal. It has been given the world and people a chance to think of values, of what we want our life to be. So we've got an opportunity to do something about it. It's never happened before. And if in some way we can plan and work toward a better life, more values, focus on we want our future to be for our children and grandchildren. God, I can't say God has given us the opportunity because I don't think this came from God, but we have been given, this generation has been given the rare opportunity to plan their future. It's never happened before.
So Debbie, beautiful lead into the next text and beautiful, beautiful kavanah and intention, right? To really, what are the positives we can see of this time? Is this really, you know, again, I think it's how do you see the desert and the wilderness? Is it this sort of scary isolation? Or is it a chance to sort of say like, okay, everything is clear now in a way that maybe it never has been because we're so condensed in what we can and can't do, and how do we see that as an opportunity? So I'd love to transition us into the next text. Thank you, that was gorgeous. By Rabbi Shefa Gold. And then Erica, because you haven't said so much yet, would you be willing to read for us? Once I pull it up? All right, so let me get it. There we go. All right, it's number 3. So Erica, go for it whenever you're ready. Yep, I think you need to unmute yourself if you haven't.
Sorry. Okay, now.
Great, thank you.
The wilderness is the place of our journey. The harsh inner reality of the wilderness purifies whatever traces of enslavement we still carry. This wilderness is the midwife of our new life after long and hard labor. The wilderness forces us to face the resistance, ambivalence, and self-delusion that has kept us from wholeheartedly receiving our birthright, the promised flow of milk and honey that is given to us and through us with each moment of life. The wilderness will scare out all our old ghosts and send them forth from the shadows into the full light of awareness. In the wilderness, we are stripped of disguises. Defenses fall away. Each part within us is forced to show its true face.
Beautiful, thank you. And it looked like you also wanted to say something before, Erica, so do you want to?
No, I'm good.
Start? Okay. So I loved, and I thought this was a really interesting metaphor as the wilderness as a midwife and sort of labor in the journeying. So does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Well, similar to what Debbie said, with new things could come about. Similarly to when there was the Depression and how President Roosevelt had Social Security, the Triangle Fire, there were different laws that were made. So hopefully, like Debbie said, that there could be new ideas, new thoughts, and a more equitable social order coming out of this, giving birth to something like that.
Beautiful, very good.
I would just kind of underscore that Rabbi Gold is talking obviously here about the potential. Whether that potential comes to fruition is somewhat of a different question. And I think it absolutely all depends. If one feels that one is entitled to a different kind of life, and somehow this represents the virus and a slap in the face, I think those kinds of people have a really hard time accessing the potential of what she's really talking about. On the other hand, if you come from a place, something along the lines of, nobody ever promised me a rose garden, not only me, but every other human being, and that one can actually take this, again, as Debbie so beautifully enunciated, as an incredible opportunity. I mean, the same ideas, you can take the same event in the life of two different people, and the event is an individual reality. What you do with it, all depends. One person will use it as a potential for growth, and the other person might, just get incredibly depressed and spend a lot of time complaining and saying, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah. Right. So it's an opportunity. It doesn't necessarily mean all of us will be able to take the opportunity.
I'd like to say something.
Sure, Ed, go ahead.
The other day, I was talking to someone about masks and or face coverings, and I said, all my life, I've been wearing masks at work, when shopping, with neighbors. We all have a variety of masks that we wear to function in the world. But this virus stuff has, for me anyway, given me an opportunity to drop all the masks. I'm 87 years old. It's about damn time I dropped those masks. This was a certain incentive, and it made it possible for me to really be me. And I'm enjoying myself a lot. I'm a different person. I was always a nice guy in quotes, but I had my moments. We all have a dark side. I don't think I have a dark side anymore. I'm just me.
What I pray for you is that after this crisis is over,
So want you to be able to see each other. Yeah.
you don't, you were able to sustain that and you don't put back on those masks. And I can identify exactly what you're saying. I think it lays us all bare in some way. And again, that can be used for growth, psychological growth, and spiritual growth as well.
I'm counting on it. Thank you, Barry.
Sure.
Erica, did you want to say something, or you just were laughing?
No.
Okay. All right, enough. A bunch of people haven't said anything yet. So Miriam, Vivian Keeson, Vivian Weintraub, Michael, anyone who hasn't said anything yet want to add anything in? Miriam Westheimer, was that a yes?
Sure. It's not specifically to this text, but I think you and I have spent a lot of time in that same part of the Arava. I lived there for 3 years. And, you know, when I see those images of the Arava, like I find them so peaceful and engaging and welcoming. And I think it's because I lived there for so long and really found a different level of just calm and awareness during the time that I did live there. And I was always struck by how people had very different reactions when they came. You know, some people had that kind of, well, you know, peaceful, love it, you know, entering into that space easily, and other people would come and just could not wait to leave, you know, found it harsh and too quiet and too stark. So when those first images that you put up, you know, that Arava image on the left was just so calming and peaceful to me.
Oh, it's on, all right.
Yeah, I really, I appreciate that. And having lived there, I lived on a kibbutz for about a year on my study abroad, and when I did a gap year in Bet Matan, actually. So I have very positive associations with the desert. And there's something I also find very, on a very personal level, just very calming about the desert. It sort of kind of just puts you in your place, I find, right? It's so vast and huge, and you kind of feel small. It sort of makes you reevaluate. And it can also be scary, right? I did hikes in the desert, and if you feel like you're starting to run out of water or you lose track of where you are because there are not so many landmarks, it can be scary. And so that's why I like the Leslie Hazelton piece, because I feel like the desert is both of those things. And some people only see the scary part or the quiet part, Miriam, and some people like us can see the, you know, sort of the beauty in the landscape also. Yeah, great, thank you. Anyone else who hadn't said anything? Marge and Walter, anyone else want to jump in? Oh, Tilda's here. Hi, Tilda.
Evelyn has her hand up.
Okay, so if no one who hasn't said anything doesn't want to talk, so Evelyn, go ahead.
Okay, I'm feeling a little alone and isolated right now, and maybe that's how Bnei Yisrael felt in the desert. But regarding COVID-19, I don't so much see this as an opportunity for a better world. I hope it will be, but mostly I feel anger. I feel anger about what has been taken away from us. The dead who have suffered so much before they even blissfully finally died. And there are people who say, you know, if it weren't for the Holocaust, we wouldn't have the state of Israel. I love Israel with every fiber of my being, with every fiber of my being. My twin sister lives there. I go to Israel. My grandchildren go to Israel. My children go to Israel. But I say, if that was cause and effect, then it would have been better not to have in Israel. It wasn't worth it. So the possibility of having a new order in this world, it's not worth it. It's not worth the suffering of the dead, and it's not worth what we are going through now. Just my humble opinion. And I just want to comment on something that Suzanne said. She said, and I wrote it down because I was very touched by it. There's a time, she said, there's a time in life when we're all in the desert. I feel very much in the desert now. I feel robbed. I feel robbed of simchas. I feel robbed. And so I'm not as hopeful as some people in this group are.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that, Evelyn. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I think this is a very painful time, and I think it is a time to be angry at how things are going. And there's a lot of loss and sadness in our own community and the community at large. And yeah, I think thank you for voicing that. That's a feeling that many of us are having also. And I see two hands. Bertha, is that a hand? Let's try to unmute you and see. No? Okay. And Marjorie, go ahead. And maybe we'll see if we can get Bertha later.
Me.
Go ahead, Marjorie. Now you're unmuted.
Just to comment on what Evelyn said, that you have to find something to look forward to, something to give you a little hope, whatever. My focus right now is my two oldest grandchildren are very close in age, and their boys and their bar mitzvah together was supposed to be this coming November. It has now been postponed because of family having to fly in from all over. It's in Philadelphia. So to me, when I get down in the wilderness, I say to myself, I talk to them on FaceTime. We talk about all kinds of things, and we focus on the future, that they will continue to prepare, and this will be a mitzvah that we all can take part in. So if I'm down, I look to the future and say, this will bring us all up a little bit, at least within the family.
Yeah, and listen, I think sort of we're all going through different moments of anger and sadness and loss and optimism and pessimism. And I think it's sort of I would say certainly for me, it has been a roller coaster of feelings, and I imagine for a lot of us. And the reason I brought some of these texts in is I think what helps me also is trying to find like, what are the ways to say positive? What are the beautiful things that are still happening, and what are the things that may happen at the end of all of this? It certainly won't make the suffering have been worth it. I agree with you. There's nothing to say for the number of 90,000 people I think it is now who have died in the US. Like, there's nothing to say that's going to make any of that better. It's horrifying. But what are the ways we can sort of, in our own little worlds, as our own little Moseses, sort of controlling our own little spheres, sort of say like, even though I'm scared, and even though I'm not sure what's happening right now, like, who are the people who are going to support me, and how can I lead in my own little way? How can I re-envision in my own little way? And the reason I love the Shefa Gold piece is, she talks about the difficulty of labor. And for those of us who have given birth and been pregnant and been blessed to have children, it is a job, and it is hard, and it is scary, and it is terrifying, and it is beautiful all at once. And as someone who was in labor for 36 hours and had oxygen at the end, like, it was not an easy process for my daughter to come into the world. And it is the best thing. I like to joke, she kind of like destroyed my body, and she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And so I think I just love that as a metaphor, because there can be beauty that comes out of pain, but you sort of have to be able to get to that place where you can get past the pain to maybe see the beauty. And that going into a new world, whether we want to be shoved into it or not, can be and almost always is a painful process, even if there's something beautiful that comes at the end. So I'm gonna say like one last little piece and then take two last comments, because it's 12 already. So we didn't even get to half of our sources, which means it was a good class. One of my teachers at Pardes said, it's always better to have more Torah that you didn't do, because that means you had a really great discussion. So I'm really glad we didn't get through everything, because that means it was a rich conversation. So I'm so glad that these texts seem to have spoken to all of you so much. I think there's a lot to say for why did we get the Torah in the desert? We got our, the book that has inspired us for years and years and years and millennium, right? That there's something about being in this place of solitude and danger and inspiration and pain and journeying that is sort of what sometimes brings about the closest relationship to God, the kind of revelation of really thinking about who we are as people. I liked what one of them said about, there sort of strips away, Sheva Gold said, strips away all your ghosts, right? And as Ed said, takes off all your masks, right? Like, we all are facing who we are essentially now in our homes without being able to interact with anyone else so much. And that's a scary process, and that can also be a beautiful process. So thank you all for sort of looking at these texts. I know it's a painful time and it's painful conversations to have, but I really appreciate sort of the positive framework a lot of you gave to think about how, when we move through this, can we see this as an opportunity, even through the pain and through the anger. So I'll take like two last comments, and then we'll officially close class. If you want to stay and schmooze, we can certainly do kind of like a little kiddish hour afterwards, just to see how everyone is. So I see Ed raising a hand, Barry raising a hand, and Terry, and then that'll be the end of the official class. And I'm happy for anyone to send me emails afterwards. You have comments, you want to have a conversation on the phone, happy to do any of that. So yes.
Comment number one, I'll be brief. Rabbi Greenberg, your carrying and pregnancy, delivery, call it inconvenience and pain, makes me bless the fact that I'm a man. Thank you very much. Somebody mentioned Moses. We don't have a Moses. Well, my personal Moses is the Governor Cuomo.
Amen.
We look at him
Amen.
every day for news, for
Amen.
developments, and this is not political. I'm not a great fan of his, or I wasn't, but I certainly am now.
That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Rabbi Greenberg. It was great.
You're very welcome. Barry, go ahead.
That's
May
what
I
I
get-
wanted to say, Rabbi Greenberg, but I don't know how to communicate.
Oh, Bertha, did you finally unmute yourself?
Yes, I wanted to say exactly what Ed Cohen said the whole time. We don't have a Moses, but we do have Andrew Cuomo. He gives me faith and hope. And if it wasn't for him, when my daughter watched the graduation on TV and she saw and heard what Obama was saying, she started to cry. And she said, how come he's there and not the president of the United States? What's going to be? She said, will I be able to go to my college? And what's going to happen? I'm graduating now. What kind of a graduation am I going to have? And she's looking at me, her Bubby, who has lost faith in mankind for a long time. But when I think about it, I came through the Depression. My brothers came home from World War II, thank God. And 9/11, we're going to get through this also. I've changed my mind about people in general. I love the world, and I hope that the world will love me and the rest of us back. Thank you for saying that, Ed Cohen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bertha. I'm glad we finally got you. Thank you for sharing. All right,
I'd
Barry.
like to say something positive, even in the desert. I've been to Israel, but I've also been to Death Valley. And Death Valley is even more barren. But I was there years ago in April, and every few years, the beaver cactus saves the few drops of water that come in. And when we were there, there was an explosion of flowers on the cactus. And I think that wherever you are, the concept of hope and the concept of things getting better, when you're alive, you can have hope. And I think that those flowers in the desert, and I could imagine if people had been there many years ago, not driving through in a car like I did, just seeing the flowers would have been so uplifting. And I think that we really need to look and find those things, because if not, you'll be destroyed. You'll destroy yourself. So you need, and Evelyn, I hope you find some positive things to look forward to. Bertha, that was great that you said that, because I think this is what we all need. And I think having this class today was like a giant therapy session, along with it was academic, but also the emotional. And who knew, like the fact that reading this passage, this Torah portion now, this week, in the midst of a pandemic, the Bible can tell us everything, and hopefully we take away the positive for it. And thank you so much, Rabbi Greenberg, and thank you for everyone. Just seeing your faces is uplifting, and to see us all here. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Beautifully said, Terry. I'm really glad this was a nice point of positive thing in your week. And you can see my cat is Zoom bombing. So welcome to my house. This is what it's like to work from home. So yes, Barry, take it away with the last comment, official comment, and then we'll have Shmooze time.
Okay, so I want to make a plea for the necessity of finding some arena of respite. And so when I get too deeply enmeshed in the negative aspects of the desert, I personally move from desert to dessert.
Amen.
And the point I'm really trying to make here, I think that's really important. because this is going to be an endurance test. And in order for each of us to get up the next morning and fight the good fight, I think each day you need something that'll refuel you for that. So I hope everybody can find something in their lives to do that. I mean, I was teasing a little bit about dessert because the only difference in English between desert and dessert is another S. But what really refuels me, and I feel blessed by this, I do a lot of FaceTime I have a whole bunch of grandkids. And that for me just keeps me going.
I just realized that when you say S, if we transfer it to Yiddish, it means SS, mein Kind.
Eat, right? So this ends officially our class time. What a joy to learn with all of you. This was certainly a bright flower in the spot in my day. I look forward to learning with you again in 2 weeks. Rabbi Katz will be back teaching next week. We're gonna tag team this, as he said, so he'll be back and then I'll be back the week afterwards. But a real joy to study with you. Really feel free to email me if you have any more thoughts or questions or set up a time to talk. And yeah, hope that this learning gave you a little bit of a bright spot in your day, and feel free to stay on and just schmooze and hang out with each other for a little bit if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And feel free to unmute yourself and say hi if you would like.
Hey, Vivian and Charlie, are you there?